The desert sky was chaos, sirens blaring, tracer fire ripping through the clouds. Four F-16s, once symbols of speed and power, now circled like wounded hawks, their voices breaking over the radio. "Mayday, Mayday! We can't hold!" Fuel was bleeding, missiles locked on, and death closed in from every direction. Then through the smoke and fire came a shape no one expected. Not sleek, not fast. An A-10 Warthog, scarred and heavy, the kind of jet they mocked as obsolete. At its controls sat the pilot no one trusted, Captain Erin Hayes. To her squadron, she was just the Warthog girl. But in the next few minutes, the sky itself would decide if she was an outcast or a legend. Iron Vale Air Base did not sleep. The desert sun scorched the tarmac by day, and even at night the air shimmered with heat waves rising from the blacktop. Engines never stopped rumbling. Helicopters thudded in the distance. Fighters roared as they clawed into the sky, and generators hummed like a constant heartbeat of war. In the middle of this restless furnace stood Captain Erin Hayes and her aircraft, the A-10 Thunderbolt II, the Warthog. To most of the squadron, it was an ugly relic, too slow, too heavy, too scarred by the years. But to Erin, it was more than an aircraft. It was her fortress, her partner, her anchor. Every dent in its fuselage, every oil-stained bolt beneath its wings told a story of survival. She ran her hand along its side the way some might touch the bark of an old oak tree. The shark mouth painted on its nose was faded and chipped, its teeth dulled by sandstorms. But Erin always thought it still looked like a predator, quiet, patient, enduring. But if she saw it that way, few others did. Inside the squadron briefing room, she was the Warthog girl. It was not said with admiration. To her fellow pilots, the name was a joke. "Hayes? She belongs on ferry runs, not in combat," one would mutter. "Put her on cargo flights. At least she can't slow us down there," another would add with a smirk. They said it loud enough for her to hear, because humiliation was part of the game. Erin never answered. She never snapped back, never asked for respect. Instead, she held herself still, her silence a shield. If they thought her quietness meant weakness, they were wrong. It meant control. Her nights told the real story. While others played cards, bragged over drinks, or collapsed into bunks, Erin sat beneath the dim glow of a desk lamp, poring over maps. Valleys, ridges, fallback routes, altitudes, all traced again and again in pencil until her hands cramped. She rehearsed scenarios alone in her quarters, whispering call-outs to an empty room, memorizing details until they were etched into her reflexes. And when she wasn't at her desk, she was in the hangar, crawling under the belly of her Warthog, flashlight in hand, oil streaking across her uniform. She checked the lines, the hydraulics, the bolts that others ignored. She didn't trust chance. If her aircraft failed her, it wouldn't be because she had skipped a step. The ground crews noticed. Unlike the pilots who strutted past them, Erin knelt beside them, asked questions, learned from their hands. They nodded to her in quiet respect as she passed. Not the noisy approval of peers, but something steadier, something real. Her father's words guided her. A mechanic before illness took him too soon, he used to crouch beside her as a child, tinkering with tools bigger than her hands. He would say, "Trust the machine, but trust yourself more." Those words lived in her like armor. Every time the Warthog's engines rumbled awake, she heard his voice over the turbine's growl. The truth was, Erin knew she would never be the fastest in the sky. She would never slice through the horizon like an F-16. She would never have the glamour of a stealth bomber or the sleekness of a cutting-edge fighter. But she believed in something her squadron had forgotten. Battles aren't always won by speed. Sometimes they're won by endurance, by the refusal to break when others crumble. Her squad mates laughed at the Warthog, but infantry on the ground never did. Soldiers knew its sound meant salvation. To them, the A-10 was not obsolete. It was the angel that arrived low and slow, but never left until the job was done. Erin carried that truth in silence, even when her peers turned away. This moment in Erin's life is more than just a military vignette. It's a reflection of something we all see in our world today. Think about it. We live in a culture obsessed with speed. Faster technology, quicker results, Louder voices. The ones who get noticed are the sleek, the shiny, the flashy. And yet, time and again, it is the steady, the disciplined, the overlooked who hold everything together. In offices, it's the quiet worker who stays late to check details no one else bothered with. In families, it's the parent who sacrifices rest so their children can thrive. In communities, it's the unrecognized hands that keep the gears turning while others chase the spotlight. Erin Hayes was living proof of that lesson. She embodied the strength of those who are underestimated. The Warthog was her mirror, mocked for being slow, but respected where it mattered most. And here's the truth. Slow does not mean weak. Outdated does not mean useless. Quiet does not mean powerless. Sometimes the things we dismiss are the very things that will save us when the storm comes. That night at Iron Vale, as Erin folded her maps and shut off her lamp, she wasn't dreaming of glory. She was preparing for survival, hers and her squadron's. And in that silent discipline, in the loneliness of her routine, a legend was already taking shape. The morning briefing room buzzed with energy. Pilots lounged in their chairs with cocky grins, tossing pens between fingers, doodling in notebooks as if the war outside were some kind of performance they were rehearsing. At the front, the commander outlined the mission, a strike against enemy armor columns pushing through the valley, columns that threatened to encircle American troops on the ground. Charts flickered on the wall, targets marked in red, approach routes drawn in chalky white. The plan was simple. Go in fast, hit hard, get out alive. Captain Erin Hayes studied the board with a quiet precision. She had spent nights preparing for a scenario like this, running through the routes, anticipating ambushes, and calculating fallback paths. When the commander asked for final questions, Erin raised her hand. Her voice was steady. Sir, a staggered attack pattern will limit our exposure. If we spread the formation by 2 clicks and angle in at offset vectors, we reduce vulnerability to concentrated fire. The armor's anti-air won't be able to track us as effectively. The room fell silent for a breath, then broke into dismissive chuckles. One pilot leaned over to another, whispering just loud enough, "Cargo logic. That's not how real combat works." Another smirked, dragging his pen across the map like a child drawing mustaches. The commander didn't even acknowledge Erin's words. He cleared his throat, nodded to another officer, and moved on. For the squadron, her suggestion was background noise, like static on the radio. Erin lowered her hand slowly. No flash of anger, no outburst. Just the calm folding of her notes, the steady rise from her seat, and the echo of laughter trailing behind her as she walked out. But there were eyes that did not laugh. The ground crew, those who worked in grease and heat, not in clean uniforms, saw Erin for what she was. As she approached her A-10 crouched on the tarmac, they straightened. They watched her crawl under the fuselage, checking hydraulic lines with her own hands, tracing the scars of battle etched into the Warthog's skin. One crewman nodded to another. They respected her discipline, her refusal to cut corners. They respected the way she whispered to her machine, brushing the shark-mouthed paint at the nose as though waking an old beast from slumber. And in that moment, as the turbines growled awake, Erin remembered her father's voice. Trust the machine, but trust yourself more. The words weren't just advice, they were lifelines. Her father had taught her that a machine, no matter how powerful, is only as strong as the person who believes in it. The world might mock the Warthog for being slow and ungainly, but Erin knew its heart. The titanium bathtub cockpit, the thick armor, the legendary GAU-8 cannon that could shred steel into dust. Where others saw an obsolete relic, she saw a predator built for survival. Engines roared to full thrust. The Warthog shook like a beast eager to hunt. Around her, the F-16 screamed down the runway, their sleek frames slicing the air like arrows. But when Erin's A-10 surged forward, its growl buried every laugh, every sneer. The ground vibrated under its weight, and the sky seemed to bow as the Warthog climbed into the desert heat. Radio chatter filled her ears. "Reaper flight, check in." Voices came sharp, proud, rehearsed. Erin keyed her mic. "Reaper 2 on station." Calm, controlled, unshaken. The horizon shimmered. Smoke curled from ridges where enemy armor advanced. Dust clouds rose beneath the grind of tank treads, black lines moving like an iron fist toward the valley. Erin's eyes narrowed. This was her moment. She dropped altitude, hugging the ground, the Warthog steady as stone. Gunfire flashed upward, angry streaks clawing at the sky. Each tracer was not just fire, it was a plea, a cry from the soldiers below. Strike back, save us, don't let us be crushed. Reaper flight, eyes on target, she called, banking hard, lining up the convoy in her HUD. Tanks crawled like armored beasts across the desert, their cannons aimed at American positions. Erin's finger tightened on the trigger. The G-80 U-8 roared. What followed was not just sound. It was an earthquake in the sky. A torrent of shells tore into the convoy, ripping steel apart like paper. Explosions rolled across the valley, tanks flipping as shock waves chewed through their armor. Dust and fire swallowed entire columns. Behind her, the other A-10s followed suit, each strike carving through the enemy's order, leaving chaos in its place. On the radio, the ground controller's voice cracked with relief. Solid hits! Reaper! Armor disrupted! Keep hammering! Erin pulled up, her chest pressed against the harness as smoke and tracers clawed at her wings. She leveled out, breath steady, gauges green. Below, the valley burned. Enemy troops scattered like ants, their confidence shattered. And in that moment, Erin proved them wrong. The cargo pilot, the Warthog girl, the one they mocked and dismissed. She had unleashed devastation that no sleek fighter could match. She had shown what endurance, resilience, and precision could accomplish. This scene isn't just about air combat, it's about life itself. How often do we see people dismissed because they don't fit the image of success? The quiet employee overlooked in meetings, the older tool written off as outdated, the steady worker mocked for not being flashy. Yet when crisis hits, when chaos breaks loose, those same people and tools are the ones who deliver. The A-10 is proof that strength isn't always speed. Erin Hayes is proof that value isn't always appearance. Sometimes the underestimated are the ones who carry the day. And as the smoke cleared over the valley, the world began to glimpse the truth. Erin Hayes was no outcast. She was a force waiting to be unleashed. The desert sky burned with the scars of battle. Below, the armored convoy smoldered in twisted fire. Captain Erin Hayes had delivered the first strike with surgical precision, proving what her A-10 could do. For one brief moment, silence reigned on the radio, the kind that feels like victory. And then the silence broke. A piercing alarm shrieked in Erin's headset. Radar warning receiver, multiple locks. Her gut clenched before her brain caught up. Enemy fighters inbound. Bandits, 11 o'clock, hi! The AWACS voice snapped across the comms. Erin's eyes shot upward. Contrails tore through the haze. Fast movers, MiGs, dropping from the heavens like hunting hawks. Sleek, silver, deadly. The kind of predators her squadron had been trained to fear. Reaper flight, jettison tanks, dive for cover, Erin barked, her voice steadier than the panic flooding the channel. She shoved her throttles forward, flares streaking behind her, pulling the Warthog into a brutal dive. The A-10 groaned, every rivet straining, as tracers whipped past her canopy. Three's spiked. They're on me, a young pilot's voice cracked. Reaper 3, barely out of training, his nerves shredding under fire. Erin scanned the horizon. She saw him, fumbling, dragging external tanks he hadn't jettisoned. A perfect target. A MiG lined up behind him, missile lock glowing like the finger of death. Erin didn't hesitate. She cut across the MiG's nose, her heavy Warthog slicing through the enemy's perfect geometry. The MiG was forced to break, its pilot cursing as his missile went wide. 3, dump your tanks and get low, Erin snapped, her tone sharp as steel. I can't. You can, Lieutenant. Now! The rookie obeyed, fuel tanks tumbling away as his jet dove for the ridge. Enemy tracers clawed at his tail, but Erin held the MiGs off, dragging them away with her bulk. Her cockpit blazed with warning lights, hydraulics strained, smoke streaking from a wing root, but her hands never shook. She pulled into the clouds. White vapor swallowed her jet whole, visibility dropping to nothing. It was suicide for most fighters, but Erin wielded the storm like a shield. Go instruments, 3-degree climb, Heading 270, she ordered. Stay on me. The rookies followed, their fear anchored by her calm. Behind them, the MiGs plunged in after, their tight formation shredded by the blind chaos of cloud cover. Radar echoes scattered, cohesion lost. The hunters had become scattered wolves. And then sunlight broke. The warthogs burst from the clouds into blinding glare. Reaper 3 was caught dead in the open, MiGs closing for the kill. Erin didn't think. She rolled in, dragging her A-10 across the kill line, stealing the shot meant for him. Tracers ripped around her canopy, a storm she barely outran. Then came the moment that defined her. A MiG screamed straight at her nose, its cockpit filling her view. She saw the glint of the enemy pilot's visor. Both fired at once. Tracer streams crossed, a deadly mirror in the sky. Erin yanked the stick hard. The Warthog jolted, passing inches beneath the MiG. She rolled, snapped back on target, and squeezed. The GAU-8 thundered. The cannon's roar was less sound than earthquake. Shells tore into the MiG, shredding its fuselage. Fire bloomed. Fragments spiraled toward the ridge below. Splash 1, Erin muttered, breath steady. Another MiG slashed across her path. She dropped her nose, traced his line, squeezed again. The cannon spat death. His wings snapped off, the wreck spiraling into the desert floor. Her cockpit lit up in red warnings. Fuel bleeding, hydraulics failing. Smoke trailed from her fuselage, painting the sky with her struggle. Outnumbered, damaged, but still unbroken. The radar shrieked again, 5 new blips closing behind her. She shoved the Warthog into a dive. The horizon turned vertical, mountains surging up like knives. For one frozen heartbeat, the ridge filled her vision. Stone rushing closer, nowhere left to go. She rolled inverted, yanked with all her strength, skimming the rock by a breath. The MiGs overshot, unable to match her brutal plunge. Her lungs burned, chest heaving, but her grip never faltered. She leveled out in the valley, clawed back into cloud cover, and disappeared. For a moment, silence again, alone in the storm. No wingmen calling, no commander guiding, just Erin, her machine, and the chaos outside. Doubt crept in. Maybe the others were gone. Maybe she was only flying to die. Her father's voice returned. Trust the machine, but trust yourself more. She steadied her breath. Trust the dials, trust the horizon, trust the instinct that had carried her this far. The storm split, and opportunity came. Another MiG burst into view, banking too wide. Erin pounced. The GAU-8 thundered once more. Fire blossomed, steel rained down. She had turned the sky into her battlefield. Here lies the heart of the story, not in the speed of jets, but in the spirit of the one who flies them. The MiGs were faster, sleeker, deadlier. By every measure of technology, Erin Hayes should have lost. Yet war isn't just machines. It's minds, choices, and willpower. Her victory came not from matching speed, but from outthinking the enemy. She used the clouds as allies, her bulk as a weapon, her calm as a shield for younger pilots. This is a lesson that stretches far beyond the battlefield. In life, too, we often measure worth by speed, how fast someone climbs a career ladder, how quickly success arrives, how loud the victories sound. But real strength lies elsewhere, in patience, in discipline, in refusing to panic when the world dives into chaos. Erin Hayes showed us that resilience can beat speed, that strategy can outlast power, that courage, when steady, is louder than fear. And with each MiG she brought down, with each decision that defied expectation, she proved the truth. Legends are not born from speed. They are carved from the moments when everything says you should fall, yet you refuse. The cockpit of Erin Hayes' A-10 was lit like a Christmas tree of warnings. Hydraulics bleeding, fuel gauges dipping toward empty, smoke trailing thick and black from her starboard engine. Every alarm was a reminder. The Warthog was dying, but she refused to surrender to despair. Erin steadied her breath, eyes sweeping her radar screen, clinging to the faint hope that someone else, anyone else, might still be alive. Then a flicker, a crippled contact limping across her scope. She turned toward it, heart hammering. Out of the haze emerged another A-10, canopy cracked, fuselage shredded, smoke streaming behind. Through the broken glass, she caught a glimpse of movement, a pilot barely upright, head lolling, struggling to breathe. His voice crackled over the emergency channel, ragged and desperate. "Erin, help me! Land!" Her throat tightened. Reaper 1. He was alive, but barely. Seconds later, another broken signal bled through the static. Reaper 3. Damaged, controls sluggish, wings trembling under every gust of wind. 2 wounded wingmen, both counting on her to lead them home. Erin knew what the logical choice was. Break off. Save herself. Her fuel was almost gone. Her own jet could fail at any second. Any commander would understand if she limped back alone. But that was never her way. "Form on me," she said, voice steady despite the chaos roaring around her. "We're going home together." The reply was weak, broken by static, but it was enough. They trusted her, even as death nipped at their heels. The flight back was a gauntlet. Every mile stretched into eternity. The desert below shimmered with heat, while her cockpit screamed in protest. Warning lights bled across the panel. One engine coughed and belched flame. Her gauges showed less and less fuel, the needle dipping lower with every breath. She eased her throttle, letting her battered comrades lean on her lead like blind men clinging to a lantern. She called out headings, altitude corrections, gentle commands meant to keep them steady. She spoke calm into the storm because panic would kill them faster than enemy fire. Minutes became lifetimes. Each time she glanced at her fuel gauge, the question burned. Do I have enough to make it? But leadership isn't about asking what you have left for yourself. It's about giving what little you do have so others can survive. Finally, the dark ribbon of the runway appeared against the desert, Iron Veil Base. Home. Erin's voice cut across the channel with quiet authority. 1, you're first. 3, you follow. I'll land last. There was no debate, no hesitation. Even broken, even mocked as the Warthog girl, she was the one they obeyed. Reaper 1 staggered into final approach. His landing gear groaned as it locked into place. The touchdown was brutal. Tires bursting in sparks, fuselage skidding sideways. But somehow he held the line. Rescue crews swarmed the runway, dragging him from the smoking cockpit. Next came Reaper 3. His plane shuddered like a dying animal, hydraulics barely holding. The landing was rough, brakes failing with a scream, but he kept the bird steady just long enough to slide to a stop. Now it was Erin's turn. Her A-10 was on its last breath. Fuel nearly dry, wings riddled with holes, systems failing. She lined up with the black strip of runway, her hands calm even as alarms shrieked. She whispered once more her father's words, "Trust the machine, but trust yourself more." The Warthog kissed the ground hard, bouncing once, twice before its wheels dug in. The engines roared one last time before coughing to silence. Smoke poured from the fuselage as Erin guided it down the strip, rolling to a stop in a defiant growl. When she climbed out, boots striking the scorched tarmac, the base had fallen utterly silent. Pilots, ground crews, even her commander. Everyone stared. This was not the Erin Hayes they mocked in briefings. This was the Iron Angel who had led broken wings home. Her flight suit was torn, her jet battered to the edge of death. Yet she stood tall. She hadn't saved herself. She had saved them all. This act isn't about dogfights or explosions. It's about leadership. Leadership in its truest form is not about chasing glory. It's not about medals or titles or who gets credit in the report. It's about responsibility. It's about carrying others when you yourself are breaking. Erin Hayes could have chosen survival. She could have landed alone, and no one would have judged her. But real leaders don't measure their worth by how brightly they shine. They measure it by who they bring home. Think of your own life. Maybe you've seen this kind of leadership, not in war, but in family and work, in friendship. The parent who sacrifices rest to make sure their children are cared for. The colleague who stays late to help a struggling teammate, even when their own work is done. The friend who walks beside you in your darkest hour, asking nothing in return. That's what Erin embodied. Not the pursuit of honor, but the refusal to leave anyone behind. And that is why legends are remembered, not for the victories they claim alone, but for the lives they carry through fire. The desert runway stretched out like a lifeline. Through the haze of smoke and heat Captain Erin Hayes guided her crippled formation home. Her voice over the radio was calm, deliberate, the only anchor for two shattered wingmen clinging to hope. 1, you're first, she ordered. 3, you're next. I'll land last. There was no pause. No one argued. Even half-conscious, bleeding, her comrades obeyed. Because in the storm, Erin's voice was the only thing they trusted. Reaper 1 staggered down final approach. His landing gear rattled and screeched, one wheel refusing to lock. The touchdown was violent. Metal shrieked, sparks spat across the tarmac, but somehow the jet held long enough to skid to a stop. Rescue crews rushed forward, flames licking the fuselage, pulling him from the cockpit. Next came Reaper 3. His A-10 shuddered like a dying animal, hydraulics nearly gone, control surfaces jerking with every movement. He hit the runway sideways, brakes screaming, fuselage grinding sparks into the blacktop. But the bird held. He slid off the strip and lurched to a halt, alive. Now the sky was empty, but for her. Erin Hayes, alone in a Warthog riddled with holes, smoke streaming behind her like a scar against the horizon. Her cockpit screamed in protest. Fuel gauge flatlined. Warning lights blinked with every heartbeat. The A-10 was barely airworthy, yet it was hers and she would not abandon it. She lined up with the runway, hands steady on the stick. Her breathing slowed. The roar of her engines was fading, but in that fading roar, she heard her father's words one last time. Trust the machine, but trust yourself more. The Warthog descended. The first impact jolted her teeth. The second bounce nearly tore the gear from the fuselage. But she held firm, forcing the beast to the ground. The tires screamed, smoke billowed, metal scraped, and then, finally, the bird settled into a ragged roll. She guided it as far as it would go, until the engines gave one last cough and fell silent. The Warthog stopped dead center on the runway, scarred and broken, but alive. Erin exhaled for the first time in what felt like hours. She unclipped her harness, pushed the canopy open, and climbed out. Boots touched scorched asphalt. The airbase had gone silent. Pilots who once mocked her, commanders who had dismissed her, ground crew who had quietly respected her, every eye was fixed on her now. They stared not at the battered A-10, but at the woman who had brought 3 broken aircraft home when everyone expected none. For a long moment, no one spoke. The desert wind whispered across the tarmac, carrying smoke and dust. Then slowly, like a wave moving through the crowd, heads bowed. Not in pity, not in dismissal, in respect. The laughter that had once chased her down hallways was gone. In its place was silence, the kind reserved for legends. The logbook entry that night was brief, written in a mechanic's hand, not a pilot's flourish. 3 aircraft returned. Every soul safe, brought home by Iron Angel. It said nothing of the doubt she endured, nothing of the insults or smirks. It did not record her sleepless nights with maps, or the way she crawled under the Warthog to check bolts no one else bothered with. It simply told the truth in the language of steel and fire. She had carried her squadron home. The Warthog girl was gone. In her place stood something more. A call sign whispered with reverence. A name born not from pride, but from sacrifice. She was the Iron Angel. This moment wasn't about a flawless landing or a dramatic explosion. It was about recognition, the kind that cannot be demanded, only earned. Erin Hayes had spent her career in the shadows, overlooked, dismissed, mocked for flying an aircraft that the world saw as obsolete. But legends are not forged in comfort. They are born in fire, in the quiet decisions to stand firm when others run. Leadership isn't about medals. It isn't about standing tallest in the briefing room. It's about ensuring the people beside you survive to see another dawn. Erin embodied that truth. She didn't just bring herself home, she brought everyone home. And that is why her squadron, her commander, her base fell silent in awe. Because in the moment that mattered most, she proved what no rank or reputation could. That courage is not about being the fastest or the strongest. It's about refusing to leave others behind. When the dust settled and the last echo of cannon fire faded into silence, Captain Erin Hayes was no longer just the Warthog girl. She was the Iron Angel, the pilot who brought her people home when all odds screamed it was impossible. But the story doesn't end on the runway of Iron Veil. Its meaning reaches further, into our own lives, into the choices we face every day. In America, we celebrate speed, innovation, and the loudest voices. Our culture praises those who climb the fastest, speak the boldest, shine the brightest. And yet, stories like Erin's remind us of something deeply American too, that true strength often hides in persistence, in discipline, in the quiet refusal to quit. Think about it. Many of you watching right now have lived through wars, recessions, hard years that demanded resilience. Maybe you weren't the loudest in the room, but you were the one who kept the family together. Maybe you weren't the fastest worker on the floor, but you were the one people turned to when things fell apart. That is leadership. That is legacy. Erin's story also teaches us about trust. She trusted her aircraft, scars and all, but more importantly, she trusted herself. In a world where everyone doubted her, that inner trust became her weapon. And isn't that something we all wrestle with? How many times have you been underestimated at work, in your community, even in your own family? How many times were you told you weren't enough, only to find that when the storm came, you were exactly what was needed? And here's the part that lingers. Legends don't ask for the title. They don't seek applause. Legends are born in the quiet decisions to carry others when you yourself are breaking. Erin didn't save her squadron for glory. She did it because leaving them behind was never an option. So let me ask you this. Who are the iron angels in your life? Maybe it's a parent who sacrificed without complaint, a teacher who saw potential in you, a coworker who never let you fall alone. Or maybe, just maybe, it's you. I want you to share those names, those stories, in the comments. Let's remind each other that the world doesn't move forward on speed alone. It moves forward on the backs of people who refuse to give up. And one more question to leave you with. If Erin Hayes could turn humiliation into honor, what parts of our own lives, our mistakes, our scars, our overlooked strengths, might become the very foundation of our legacy? That's a conversation worth having. Thank you for staying with this story. If it touched you, if it made you think, if it reminded you of someone in your life, please take a moment to like this video, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs encouragement today. Because at the end of the day, stories like this aren't just about war. They're about us, about resilience, about carrying each other home, about remembering that sometimes the ones who are mocked the loudest are the very ones who will save us all.